last session, and sorry, I'm not sure how I'm going to sort of engage you after 2 minutes. Really? Engage you after Natasha. So really, thank you very much. That was also very, very educational for me. This is the research that we did in Europe, really looking at diaspora change makers. And as we mark zero tolerance, it's about amplifying voices and experiences, and also the work of diaspora change makers, because they have been really crucial in our work on FGM, and we always have to acknowledge that. And this report really basically talks about them. So yes, Forward was leading on this work. We've talked a little bit about Forward, but I just want to talk about the study aims. It was really to document the motivations, especially actions and impacts that African diaspora individuals and also organizations have actually in the diaspora have made in the global move to end FGM, because they have really made a lot. And very often we are not able to about the work that the diaspora have made. The study used qualitative design and methodology to provide change makers their own perspective for these motivations. And what was good is that we used a case study framework to really assess the impact of activities. There was in-depth interviews and discussions, and we worked with an external researcher. Some of you may know her from Sierra Leone, Okanda, who's based in Sweden. So she contacted quite a number of people. In terms of the background, we had a call for our participation. It was published widely. We also contacted people. We used purposeful sampling, where respondents were asked to basically identify potential. So there was a kind of snowballing purposeful sampling to get people. Interviews, we used interview guide, were conducted over 3 months, starting in 2022. A total of 58 participants were approached and 27 agreed to participate. Quite a number of people also were not able to participate because they wanted to be paid. Technically, we didn't have the money, so we weren't able to provide that. A total of 15 countries were represented, and this was part of the UNFPA UN Spotlight Program to end female genital mutilation and violence against women and girls. This is just a quick presentation of the country of residence, but also country of origin of the people who participated. So there were quite a number of, maybe about 3/4 were from the UK, but others spread Australia. In fact, we actually wanted to do just Europe, but when we shared the information, we got calls from Australia, we got calls from Canada, and we also got calls from the US that they wanted to be part of the study. So in terms of the findings, I just want to look at the 3 areas that we found. What were the motivations for working on FGM? For a lot of the change makers. And for quite a lot of them, they had extremely traumatized experiences of FGM themselves. And this spurred them into activism because of their own lived experiences and also hearing the experiences of others. So being in Europe, it actually made it easier for them to really start working on the issues. The change makers often realized the negative health impact and human rights violation, particularly when they were here, because a lot of people felt, again, we're hearing repeatedly, it's normal. This is something you experience, it's okay. But coming here, you're actually seeing that you're quite different. You actually see that there are issues around health. There's a lot more engagement and conversations around this. So this was also part of their motivation. The third one was also activism, mainly initiated by the death of a relative or a close friend. So death was actually a crucial factor. People remembered either the time that they had FGM when somebody died, or they had experience of relatives who had died during childbirth. So this was a big, big factor. And I'll give you some of the quotes. The issue of FGM came like a wake-up call. When a member of our community here, the husband and herself were arrested in Norway for having taken the youngest daughter or some of their daughters and circumcising them. And that is when I knew that FGM was even illegal. I got a master's degree. And with all my education, I've been circumcised, my mother's been circumcised, my grandmother's been circumcised. So it's run for generations in our home. I didn't even know. It wasn't even an issue. Even though I'm a gender activist and a political scientist, well educated up to master's level, I didn't even know anything about the issue. It's a taboo topic and nobody ever spoke about this. So this is an activist. So really speaking out and hearing about people's experiences also became a critical factor. And this was also either the health or the human rights or the legal implications that made people want to work on FGM. The death factor was also something, and this is somebody's experience. I was a midwife in the UK. I remember I went home to ask my grandmother about FGM. She looked at me as if to say, what's she talking about? It was later on that I realized that this, my paternal grandmother, who was from Ghana, did not practice FGM. So she didn't know what I was talking about. Because I did not get a favorable answer from her, I was disappointed. So I started asking questions and doing research herself in order for her to really get into the understanding on issues about FGM. The second issue was the scope of activism, and the three things that we found was awareness raising and advocacy within the communities that they come from. And this evening, having conversations with Gina, she was actually saying awareness raising and community conversations is so critical, particularly on raising awareness for people to come to services. So how do diaspora change makers really go to the grassroots to make this happen? Care and support for women with FGM, culturally appropriate care. And we actually realized that there was a lot of work that was also being done by specialist services. And some of them was also done by organizations. And so care for women was also very, very important. And the third one was generating evidence to support advocacy and counter myths of FGM. We know that there are so many myths and misconceptions that continue to persist and fuel FGM. Natasha, you were talking about research, and we know that research is so critical. Juliet, we know that research, data collection is so important. And again, we've got a lot of diaspora change makers who are working as researchers. So it's really important to explore that. Having courage to start conversations on FGM, and this was about a US lady. She said, when I commuted between my home and my workplace by train, I would sit next to a total stranger and ask, have you ever heard of anything called FGM? I received all kinds of different responses and reactions, but one thing that encouraged me is that nobody ever said, go away. I am tired, I don't want to hear, I don't want to talk. People were always interested in hearing what I had to say, and I realized at the end of my commute every day, I had taught at least 2 people about FGM. So some people said they had heard of FGM, but said it does not happen anymore. This response often opened a door for conversations. So again, I know that we have a colleague at Forward, and she's always talking about FGM, and sometimes I said, Mary, will you not stop talking about FGM? Every chance I have to say, do I talk about FGM? So I know that there are a lot of people like that in you know, and being brave. It's you know, opening the conversation. Some people find it very difficult, but sometimes from the diaspora, you don't really find it so difficult. So again, we need to learn how do we open conversations. I'm not going to go through the details, but this was also the impact of some of their activism. Some reported activities brought about behavior change. But what I put in red is what I really want because it matters to us. One participant started the only support group exclusively for women FGM survivors, which sponsors them to undergo reconstructive surgery. So I really would like to follow up and find out how this was also being done, because this is so important. This has had a tremendous impact on women's lives, not just physically, but in their sex lives and also psychologically. So again, it's really important to see how diaspora change makers are really propagating some of the good work, particularly around reconstructive surgery. And really funding to make it happen is really, really important. How best do you care for women with FGM? Do no harm is so, so critical. We were talking about the issue of do no harm. And this is the story of a 20-year-old lady who had a panic attack when she came for defibrillation. When she recovered, I think even at the time they said she nearly fainted. And when she recovered and she was asked about it, she said what had triggered her anxiety episode was the label on the door to the surgery said minor procedure room. We need to be very careful. A minor procedure room for her was, in my country, SBM was performed on me at a hospital. And on the door where the procedure was performed, the sign was the same, minor procedure room. So when I saw the sign, I was immediately reminded of my FGM experience. I removed the sign from the door whenever the clinic was in session. This was a health professional in the UK. So again, it really shows the extent of how we need to go very carefully and sensitively, because you never know what will trigger somebody. And if a woman is coming for a service and just something at the door can trigger her, what else is going to trigger women? So we need to be really clear about that. Change makers face a lot of challenges. Being a black woman in Spain is also an issue because the organization is black-led, funding is very hard to obtain. A friend once advised me to put a white Spanish CEO so that she would more readily receive funding. It's also true. I told her over my dead body, I would rather sell samosas before I do this. The authorities do not take us seriously because the organization is run by black women. This can be quite frustrating. So again, we have to look at funding and who is getting funding when it comes to these issues. A lot of diaspora organizations, individuals, we are the lead, but when it comes to management, leadership roles, etc., it becomes very problematic. The biggest challenge came from the community, which said, I should not be speaking about FGM. It was very hard when I started to talk on FGM in the community. I was called names. I was told, you are this here, you are that. Not very nice names. Sometimes it became very scary and I felt that I could not continue my activism. And I almost wanted to give up. This is somebody in France, but it's not only here. We have a lot of women who have actually had this experience. And to this day, some people still talk about this. Recently, they say, but why are you always talking about FGM? Why are you always talking about vaginas? You know, so the issue is that a lot of people really get a backlash about these things. Survivors need recognition and acknowledgement. And as we talk about investing in survivors, they do not take me seriously, and yet it's because I exist. I who have been cut, these others have become specialists and are recognized. If they are specialists, have studied about FGM and then become specialists over my vagina, it's because of the information they got from us who have been cut. I think my cut vagina is all the specialism I need. In France, they have the habit of considering FGM survivors as victims and not as experts. So again, repeatedly, we have to always recognize the important role that survivors play in really bringing out issues, in really putting FGM on the agenda, but also making the FGM an issue of concern, not only in Europe, but also in our countries of origin. So, merci beaucoup, and it's been a pleasure to meet you.